Hi everyone, my name is Lucas. Today I'm going to be showing you how I made this Tearout Drop. I'm going to play it really quickly and then I'll get into how I made it. Okay, so for the drums, I have a pretty basic dubstep pattern here. I think the trick is to find some good quality samples. I just got these from Splice, and I'll just play it really quick so you can hear the drums soloed out. Oh yeah, I also got a chant in there. For the processing, I didn't really add anything on there because they're already pretty good, and I just added some reverb on the ride and the crash, and also the clap that's layered underneath the snare. I also faded out the transient of the crash because they're hitting on the kick and snare, and I just wanted the transient to come from the kick and snare and not from the crash, so I just had a little fade in. And besides that, it's just the reverb bus that's on those, and then I also have a EQ that's cutting out the low end of the cymbals. Okay, onto the basses. So before I show the sound design, I'm just going to show a bit of the arrangement for this. Whenever I'm starting off a drop and I don't really know what kind of rhythm I want to go with, I usually just kind of do this same trick, and it usually helps me out. I usually start with like a growl bass or like a stabby bass to start off the drop, something that's gonna bring a lot of impact right as the drop hits, and then I have a more consistent bass, and I go back, repeat that same pattern, and the last half of the bar I put a little filler bass, and that is all repeated, but instead of a half a bar I end it with a full bar fill this time. And then I could just have copy pasted this and then added variation, but in this case the bass line is just pretty simple. It's not really that rhythmic, so I thought it'd be too boring to just copy paste and then add different fillers. I do have a frequency shifter that's adding a little bit of motion to the drop, but I didn't want to copy paste it, so I just ended up switching the rhythm completely and going with something different on the second half of the drop, but kept that same idea with the half bar fill at the end and then a full bar fill to end the measure. And as for sound design, I guess I could just show how I usually get into starting off the drop. Usually I'll just start with like the initial I have like an initial preset, and I will just put all my processing to begin with. I don't know if this is a bad idea, but I like to have everything already on there, like a processing chain that I already know that I'm comfortable with, that I like, or maybe even if it's just like 2 OTTs or something. But in this case I have all this. I was trying to use disperser more, so I have like 3 of them in a row. That might be kind of crazy, but it ended up working for this track. And so I guess I could just start with the first bass that we have. So I just used a square wave. Most of the sounds in this drop is just a square wave. I have the unison up to 5, and I have LFO1 controlling the detune. I'm also using a bandpass filter to give the motion, and I set the random down to 0, and in the global tab I lowered the width down to 30. And in the effects tab, this is kind of just where I start to mess around and see what works. And so I usually just try to keep on slowly adding more effects until I start to reach something that sounds good. And after I get something that I like, that's when I just start cloning it, and then I'll start to mess around with the sound designer, just tweaking small things. Like this one is also just a square wave, but I have the flip turned up, so if I had the flip to 0, it would just be a square wave again. So it's just like kind of minor changes, or I'll change the LFO shape, and this way all the sounds are like not too different from one another, so they're somewhat similar because they've just been cloned, but the minor tweaks make them different enough to where it's not going to get boring. And also for the main bass here, it's actually layered with another, so this one by itself sounds like this. I wanted to add like a bit more high end, so I just added another. That one is more like metallic, and it kind of fills that high end, and so together they sound like this. And then I have a separate sub underneath it all. The sub also, if I go to it, I have this on mono and legato, and I have the portamento time set to 123 milliseconds, because in the initial bass it also is set to that same amount of time, so that way they can pitch together, because I do have a little bit of pitch on this one. Kind of goes up an octave. So with the sub underneath it sounds like this. And then one more bass that I'd like to show is this one, which is gonna be like the filler bass at the end of the measure right here. So let me go to it really quick. Okay, so for this one, it's the same exact thing, just also been cloned. The difference with this one is the LFO shape, and then also I turned off the beat sync, the BPM sync, and I have this macro controlling the rate, and so I just made an automation clip with that, which is right here, and so that's what's giving it that that cool like slowed down effect. I also should mention that I have a reverb bus, so I just right click this bottom arrow, and I did route to this track, and I put a reverb on, and I just put the dry to 0, and then I just created an automation clip on the wet knob, and I also EQ'd the reverb just to take out any low end just in case. And then with the automation clip, I just ramped it up at certain parts, like over here, these little ramps up, just to add some reverb where there's kind of empty space. So it kind of gives that extra energy. And also I have this bass, which I resampled because of the unison. It would sound different every time I played it back, so I just recorded it with Edison, and then have it resampled here. And then I also just chopped it up and made like a little rhythm out of it. Yeah, so it's pretty simple. I also have the sub bass that's going underneath with it. And in certain parts I have it like the sub going like up an octave or something, just to, I guess, just like add a little bit more motion to it. Makes it sound like it's kind of jumping around with the sub underneath. So I guess that's it for basses, and now we can move on to the effects. Actually, before I do that, I just want to bring up the sidechain as well really quick. And for sidechain, I usually use a fruity balance. So first I just have this track unrouted, and then I would right click the little arrow and just do route to this track, and also make sure that it's not like also routed to your master. So so if that was the case, I would do route to this track only, and then I would just click this arrow for the reverb bus and do route to this track. That way it's not being like played double on top of each other. Anyway, for the sidechain, I just use a fruity balance, so I'll just right click the volume knob, do create automation clip, and after I have the automation clip, then I'll just go one more time and right click and do link to controller, and then I'll put this asterisk 0.8 in there and hit accept. And so that way it won't go past 80%, because if you put if I were to type in a value and put 80%, that's exactly at 0. So that way I can put the automation clip all the way to the top, because you'll see sometimes people, they sidechain and they don't do that, and so their sidechains look like this with the little space at the top, and I don't know why. I just like it all the way to the top. Plus it's easier if I'm messing around with one of the sidechains, and instead of having to copy paste the value or type in the value, I can just know that if it's at the top of the automation clip, then it's exactly where it needs to be at. And I have a bigger duck for the kick and a smaller one for the snare. I also have like a little tail going down right before it gets sidechained, which I feel like just kind of helps kind of have like a drop off feeling at the end. I could just play the bass with the sidechain, that way you guys could hear it. Yeah, okay, so I guess that's it for basses now, and I'll move on to the couple effects that we have here. Alright, so for effects, I don't really have that much. Some songs I have more, and for this tutorial I didn't really add that many. I just have some Foley, and I have a background vocal, and I just added panning to that, and I have some down sweeps just to help it impact harder on certain moments, and I have this riser, and I put that to transition into the second half of the drop, and also to end the drop off. And I also have an impact that also helps with the transition over into the second half of the drop, and it also helps finish the drop. So I really don't have that much, and I don't really have to put too much processing. Usually just I could add some panning or extra reverb, or maybe cut some low end if there's any unnecessary low end. But other than that, I just keep it kind of simple and put it where it's needed. Sometimes I'll do more than others. Like I could add like extra glitch sounds between the gaps, or I could add crowds, stuff like that. Anything that's gonna help give more energy to your song, and that's where you can be more detailed and add in that extra ear candy here and there in your song. In this case, I didn't really add too much. There isn't that many gaps for me to really put it in, since the bass is kind of don't leave much room for extra effects. But so I guess just look around and try to find samples that can add extra energy, and then make sure there's a room for them and it's not getting too crowded. But other than that, I think that finishes the tutorial. I'll just play it one more time.